Alrighty, folks, it is my pleasure to bring on the one and only Simon, the uneducated economist. He was the keynote speaker in Vegas last year and crushed it. He's over 140,000 subs on YouTube and crushing it daily. His live streams are often over an hour long, which is just so phenomenal. I don't know how he does it. Simon, how you doing, man?
I'm doing excellent, Mike, man. Thank you for asking me on today.
Yeah, I know my audience loves you. You just look at the data in a very unique way. You have a great way of telling stories. But Simon, I want to ask you perhaps an uncomfortable question. I've been celebrating you joining my school. This is the third time you've been on it, and I had a very, frankly, confrontational. I might even once call it nasty comment that I just want to clear the air on. Are you ready for this?
Yeah.
What are you doing to me, Zuber?
Hey,
This is
man,
not
what do
fun.
we got?
So a couple of days ago, I had a comment from I believe it was a female viewer, basically saying, "I don't understand why you are celebrating Simon. I don't know. I understand why you are part of it. He thinks that ladies, females, should not be involved in investing." To which I responded, "That's not the guy I'm talking to. You must be talking to someone else." But I thought I would just ask you and let you clear the air right up front, Simon. Do you believe that ladies should not be involved in real estate investing?
Absolutely not, man. I mean, that's not something I believe. I believe that anybody should be getting into real estate, and regardless if you're male or female, that's not an issue. I am not somebody who is going to say that women should not be involved within real estate. I have some very close friends that are major real estate investors. Some of them are business owners, and to think that I am somebody who's going to say that they should not be involved in real estate or doing their business is not my character. That is not who I am. So wherever that comment came from is not, it's not from me.
No, no. I actually responded if we could find the comment saying you must be talking about a different Simon because I know this guy pretty well. We've talked for hours. He's at my event. That's not who he is. We believe everyone from any situation can get rich or wealthy by just doing some basic things, right? Create discretionary income, buy assets, do it for a long time. The organ between your legs doesn't matter, right? We want all of them, everyone, to get on the property ladder and get wealthy. So I just wanted to clear that air. I knew that's who you were at your core, but I wanted to address it just in case there was any confusion. Thank you for doing that.
Yeah, you bet, Mike. Yeah, I mean, and I have to say that there's a lot of imposters, out there, and there's fake sites and fake profiles and stuff like that. So, I unless you see it on like in from my portfolio, from my
Yeah,
profile personally or something like that, then don't take it, because
yeah,
yeah, that's not me. That's not something I even
yeah.
would even
Never, you would never think of that. I knew
no.
that's who you were, but I wanted to get it behind us. All right, now let's talk about why we're really here. You
Okay.
really blew up several years ago when you were highlighting what was coming in the lumber market, right? Again, you are a on the desk, you're at the retail, right? You're at the point of consumption.
Yeah.
And I believe I saw a video from you, might be a week old, might be 2 weeks old, talking about lumber being under $500, uh, which just seems crazy to me. So tell me where lumber is at today, but more importantly, what does that mean for what's coming?
Yeah. So this has been going on for a little bit of time now, and that the lumber prices have been down, and it's so funny because so many people out there are going, man, I don't know where you're seeing lumber at. Lumber's expensive. It's not. Lumber is incredibly cheap. 500 per thousand is a price that we were experiencing back in 2017, 18. It is a very normal price. Now, when I think about 500 per thousand and what that means for the mills, at this time, 500 per thousand is not a profitable position for a lot of these mills. And over the last year, we have experienced an insane amount of mill curtailments, shutdowns, and inventory depletion. And now that is growing very immense. The depletion is now very prominent within the distribution network when it comes to lumber. And I feel that any kind of pop to home building demand, and you're going to see those prices skyrocket again. But at this time, what we are experiencing is low price, low production, and even more mill curtailments that are set forth. Even permanent shutdowns of mills have been taking place over the last year. So it's not good signs at all within the lumber production side of things. And when you see how the permit issuance and home starts have been falling over the last couple of years, it's no wonder why the guys who are producing this particular building material don't want to be out there producing this material if there's not a lot of buyers, or at least a not, the future idea of people buying it.
Yeah. I guess one of the questions I would love to hear from you that I
Mm-hmm.
understand intellectually, but I don't understand in practice is once somebody who's running a mill decides to do a curtailment or shutting down a line, how long does it take from, that executive decision to that line no longer functioning? Is it hours? Is it days? Is it weeks? Is it month? How long does it take to go from executive decision to, hey, that line's stopped?
Um, as far as I can tell, I mean, I imagine every mill is going to be different when it comes to this particular thing. But generally, what I have found is that you will have like announced curtailments, like in this month of, 3 months down the road, we will be shutting down this particular line. We will, pull this much amount of production out of the mill so that it will, like if we're running 500,000, just making up a number, 500,000, we're going to cut it down to 300,000, pulling 200,000 off the, lineal feet or whatever, board feet off the market, just, kind of assuming
Mm-hmm.
a number. And so sometimes you might find where it'll be like a very, prominent announcement, coming up. Hey, we're going to do this in 3 months. We're going to shut down this amount of production and then we won't be firing it back up again. So that's like, maybe how a curtailment might go. Another curtailment might be in the sense that, hey, we are going to be slowing down for maintenance. And so a scheduled maintenance curtailment is different from, say, hey, a production curtailment trying to tighten up inventory. So there's going to be a couple of reasons why the mill might want to curtail. And then you have like curtailment leading into, hey, things didn't get better, permanent shutdown. So again, like each mill is going to be different on how it is that they do this. British Columbia is very sensitive. So they are like, if the price fluctuates in the British Columbia area, those mills will curtail like right now. They are high cost, high input cost, high output. So, the moment that the price starts to fall, they're like, whoop, it's done. All right. So when you think about a curtailment and then what that means for the mills will stop buying logs. Well, there's logs that are already falling. Those
Mm-hmm.
have to come off the hill. Like, and so you think about it, it's like this steady stream of, and they refer it as fiber, right? They don't call it wood. They call it fiber, right? So these big trees, they need to get off the hill and down to the mill. Well, once these trees have fallen, they have to go. They can sit there for a little bit, but if they did lay there for any length of time, you're going to start finding that they're not going to be useful for sawing up into lumber. So they have to move into, off the hill and down into the mill, get into the distribution part of things. Well, if the mill is slowing down, they end up with a backlog, a backup of logs. And now the loggers up there stop falling, and then you have this gap in production that takes
Right.
place. Well, it's heavy, it's fiber. And so the idea of a log and the distance that it has to go to the mill, well, each mill may be buying logs from different locations. And so the distance that they have to travel, again, could be varying, a variation between these mills that might extend one mill for a length of time as opposed to another. So firing that mill back up says, hey, we need to get these load of logs coming in here. Well, then, all of a sudden now you got to start falling trees and get those trees off the hill and get them start moving through the line again. And so the gap in production that takes place there can be, wildly length of
Yeah.
time.
Yeah, the reason I
Fortunately,
wanted to understand this is again, I've studied economy, for 30 years. And typically speaking, it is easier and quicker to shut something down, like a mill, than it is to start it up.
well,
The reason I
absolutely.
Yeah, so that's where I was good. That was my very next question is how long does it take to start up? And typically you can shut something down, whether it's a, utility plant, this or that, in days or weeks, but it could take months to ratchet it back up, safety concerns, maintenance checks, all of these things. Because if we're at 500 per thousand for any length of time, we're just going to create this big, huge gap in production. And darn it, man, if we get to the spring selling season, which is 4 months away, 5 months away, and we get lower rates, we get some kind of new home buyer credit nonsense from the federal government, we could go back to 1,000 of, whatever it is, $1,000 per whatever you call it. This is
Yep.
your area, but it could be a problem.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And well, we're already seeing, like, I'm experiencing the tightening of inventory already. Like, just for an example, I'm a small retailer out in the middle of the, Pacific Northwest, out on the coast, and I have to access my lumber from, the Portland area, from that general hub. Now, we have vendors all over, right? So, you call up one vendor, it's just like you don't like their price, you call up a different vendor, see what they got, right? Now, just for an example, something pretty simple, a 6x10 beam. Right? Now, this is something that, a guy says, hey, I need 12 of these things. No problem, right? You call up the vendor, say, hey, I need, 5 of these beams. The vendor says, I'm sorry, all I have is 20s and 8s. I have nothing in between right now. When are you
Wow.
going to get more? I don't have any on order. Why? Well, they're on
Wow.
order, but no set confirmation on when they're coming in. So there's no like delivery date. Okay, call up the next vendor. I'm sorry, I don't have any. The next
Mm.
vendor, I don't have any. Well, wait a minute. There's no beams in the market right now because the
Wow.
mills are only running what is most popular, which is going to be 2x4 plate stock, 2x6 plate stock, and stud lengths. So this
Mm.
is what's selling, then that's what they're going to produce. They're not going to produce something that doesn't sell very often. So unfortunately, the beams in the wider lengths, like 2x10, 2x12, some of the longer lengths, like 16s, 20s, 24s, these things are becoming very, very, infrequent as far as its
Mm.
availability within the market. Now, again, that's just another sign of the inventory tightening up, but this is definitely occurring right now. So it's already starting to happen. How much that actually grows, we'll see how the
Yeah.
next few months lay out as far as prices go. If the prices start to run up, then those mills are going to start ramping up production again. But
Right.
right now, I see the tightening of inventory in a fairly dramatic way.
So to kind of close out this topic, would it be fair to say it takes twice as long, maybe 3 times as long to start up a mill than it does to shut it down?
Man, I would have to think that would be, you know, it, I would think that would be mill dependent. Like if you
Okay.
shut a mill completely down, then it's going to take a while to fire it back up. But if you just cut a production line, or if you're just like, back and easing up on production,
Okay.
it might be a lot easier to fire that back up. The problem that the mill is mostly going to face is that a lot of lumber is now kiln dried. So the kilns are only so much space and so much time. So it's a bottleneck. Like even if you wanted to produce more lumber, you only can do it to the amount of kiln space that you have.
Hmm.
So if you're filling up the kilns, it doesn't matter. You can have a ton of lumber sitting out there waiting to get into the kiln to dry. So it's still going to be a limited amount of production, even if they were to ramp up to full production. They can only go to what the kilns can allow. So and
Like
then
it.
there's of course green lumber that doesn't face that, but that's again, it's just like I think that's going to be mill dependent. And then again, like if the mill has completely shut down or if they're just backing off on production itself. So
So this
I couldn't give you an exact time on that.
Nope, that's fine. It's totally cool. But I think it's fair to assume that starting up a line takes longer than shutting it down. At least my
Absolutely.
historical, I think that's a fair thing. And the reason that's a problem is if we are on a rate cutting cycle, as Jerome Powell has said, we are recalibrating. As Chris Waller, Fed president, said, there's a lot of rooms to cut. We are now on a rate cutting cycle.
Yep.
And that generally means rates will be lower in the future. We can guess, we can postulate how low. No one knows, at least yet, but they'll be lower. And if we do get the federal government behind some kind of first time home buyer credit or something, maybe we give builders credit. We actually worry about supply instead of demand. Hallelujah. Um, Lumber could be the sticky wicket, right? Lumber could jump to 1,000. Well, how high did it go in the last cycle?
Well, it peaked out at like 1,700 per thousand. Like I think it closed. I had a closing of like somewhere around 16,
Okay.
but like during the trades, it got all the way up to 1,700 per thousand. And that's like, to kind of equate that down to like, a 2x4. I sell a 2x4 right now for $4. During that time, I was selling them for around 13.50.
Oh,
So, and this is
wow.
the thing. like a lot of times people will be like, yeah, all the greed and manipulation and all that other stuff. Just because we had a 2x4 priced at 1350 doesn't mean that we were actually selling a lot of them.
Okay.
So that's something else to remember, that there wasn't a lot of lumber being moved at that time. And at 1350, the only people who were buying were the people who had absolutely no other choice but to buy.
Right.
When you think about that, that's generally done from a contract, from from somebody who is in inelastic demand. Like, they cannot
Correct.
postpone this
Yeah.
purchase; they
Yeah.
have to
Building
move
building a
forward.
deck, need the 2x4.
Correct.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And so, and this is the reason why you saw a lot of projects start to fail. A lot of the apartment complexes across the nation, they were
Mhm.
stuck in the middle of an inelastic demand that they had no other choice but to buy expensive lumber, and they went
Pay it up.
bankrupt on
Yeah.
the project. Yeah.
Yeah. Very, very cool. Well, I'm curious. We've had a couple of days to digest what the Fed had to say, what Powell had to say. What did you think about the 50 basis point cut? What did you think about his talk? What did you think about this term recalibration?
Mm-hmm.
What's your input on all that?
Yeah, it's pretty deep stuff, man. There's this, like, there's a lot to the monetary policy. And me, I have a very unique way of looking at this monetary policy, where I have dove deep into the documents and the speeches and tried to find the message that is not being delivered to the mainstream media, but the message that is being delivered to the other central bankers through these
Mm-hmm.
speeches. And man, I have a different theory than what a lot of people have out there. But yeah, we saw a huge 50 basis point cut, which is like an extreme. Like, this is like something that typically would have been interpreted as like an emergency cut or an extreme
Correct.
thing. Like, this isn't like maintenance. This is like, wow, right?
Yeah.
So what's going on here, and what I feel the need for such a basis point, or such a extreme basis point cut or extreme cut, is something called the neutral interest rate, right? And this is something that is very difficult to try and wrap your head around. But the neutral interest rate is the rate that's neither accommodating nor restricting the economy.
Mm-hmm.
And this neutral interest rate is not easily observed in real time. And so you really have to experience the economy and then look back at it and say, okay, where was the neutral? Where is the neutral interest rate according to what we have already experienced? Because you can't really see it in real time. But knowing that the neutral interest rate is now falling and has been for quite some time, that then widens the gap between where the Fed funds rate sits and the neutral interest rate, which makes it more restrictive on the economy. So we are actually experiencing more restriction to the economy than if the Federal Reserve, I mean, even though the Federal Reserve is sitting still with the Fed funds rate, because
Correct.
that neutral interest rate falls, it ends up creating more restrictions. So by dropping the 50 basis points, they are actually kind of going in lockstep with neutral and not really adding any more restriction to the economy, or any less restriction, if you really think about it, if they are
Mm-hmm.
chasing the neutral interest rate down. So this is where I think, like, a lot of the recalibration mindset is going to come in, is that they have to figure out exactly what it is that they are going to do with the Fed funds rate if the neutral interest rate continues to fall. Because if it goes close to zero, they have no stimulating effect with the dropping of interest rates, which is going to be very difficult for them to operate their monetary policy if they can't stimulate during the next downturn. So this is like, I don't want to get it too complicated because it's already kind of like a mind spin on that kind of stuff. But that's
Yeah.
really what I see happening, and that's where I think this recalibration is going to start coming in.
Yeah.
Is
The neutral
going for
interest
that
rate,
neutral.
sometimes called R star, just to confuse
Mm-hmm.
people. It is that kind of, it's not a mathematical formula. It's an opinion. It changes every hour, every day, every week, every month. You can target it, but you can never kind of get it. And this is one of the things that I've talked about on my channel, quarters ago, that if the neutral interest rate was to fall because inflation is falling, the Fed is naturally more restrictive, right? When they stayed at 5.25. And I think it's very clear that they're going to quickly get to what they think is R star or neutral. Then the question I ask myself is, where is that? Well, again, Chris Waller on Friday said there's a lot of room for the Fed to cut rates in the next 6 to 12 months. So I think R star, the neutral rate going into the Fed meeting, was estimated to be around 3.25 to 3.5, maybe 3 to 3.5. We're going to learn this week. There's something like 13 Fed speeches this week. um, where people are at. And again, if Chris Waller is correct and PCE on an annualized basis is already under 2, our star, the neutral interest rate, might be 2.5. So we might be on a significant rate cutting cycle in the next 6 to 12 months. What do you think of all that?
Well, I could totally agree with that. And in fact, I have a tendency to believe that the R star is even lower than that.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
Well, if you go in, there's a couple of different ways that they estimate R star. Again, because it's like you're saying, it's an opinion. Nobody really knows exactly what it is that this is. You have to observe it, in the past. But nobody knows exactly where that R star is. But it's my opinion that the reasoning that the neutral interest rate was falling to begin with hasn't really changed much, because if you go back and you listen to the Federal Reserve, and especially John Williams' speech, Monetary
Mm-hmm.
Policies for a Low Neutral Interest Rate World, it's a very telling speech. It was given November of 2018. I encourage everybody to
Mm-hmm.
go read that speech. But in there, he talked about 3 global trends that was the bulk of the reasoning for the dropping of the neutral interest rate. And it broke it down to demographics. It was an older population and a dropping of birth rates. It was a slowdown in global growth. And then it was also a wider wedge between the safe and liquid assets of U.S. Treasuries and high yielding corporate debt. And so when I think about the demographics issue, although we had a bunch of people die during the COVID thing, I don't know if it necessarily reversed any kind of trend that was causing the neutral interest rate to rise. Like, we still have an aging population with a low birth rate. So I don't think that trend has changed. The slowdown in global growth is pretty much apparent. Like, we are slowing down again. So that is still an issue that's driving the neutral interest rate. And then again, like, that wider wedge between the safe and liquid assets of U.S. Treasuries and corporate debt. And although we've had a rise in the U.S. Treasuries as far as the yield goes, which would at one time close that gap between the corporate debt and the U.S. Treasuries, that wider wedge had narrowed during COVID. But I believe that is starting to grow in an extreme way as the new U.S. Treasuries are starting to find lower yields going into the future. And I imagine that if we have a dropping of interest rates, that would only occur even more. So that wider wedge between those two, I just don't see how the neutral interest rate can do anything but continue to fall. I mean, in that sense, unless they have some sort of intervention with again, stimulus checks or something that starts to obscure this whole thing.
Right.
But the global trends, I think, are continuing, and that's going to be a
So you
dropping of
think
the.
it's possible that R star, this neutral rate, is even lower than 2.5?
Well, I think it could be. I don't
Oh,
know,
it could be.
right? And
Yeah.
so I wouldn't put it past it to be at 2.5, since I just don't know. But
Right.
I just look at what is happening with those global trends, and then I think about some of the estimates that some of these other feds have talked about with R star, because there's more than
Mm-hmm.
just one estimate. That it seems to me that trend is falling. The neutral interest rate trend seems to be going down. So by the time that we get, like, a few months into the future here, we're going to find out where the neutral interest rate is today. But if we're continuing going down, yeah, we very well could be at 2.5, but we could be lower as well. I mean,
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
mean, again, I just
Yeah.
don't
We
know.
don't.
So I'm just going to
No.
assume that
No.
it's not necessarily the case, and
Yeah.
so.
No one knows. That's absolutely true. I do think it's weird because, again, I think you kind of alluded to this earlier. The powers that be need some inflation to keep this game going. So we can't have R star at 0, right? 0 would be a problem.
Zero
Um,
would be a major problem for the Federal Reserve.
yeah.
But is it really? Because I mean, essentially, they've been at 0 before. They were at 0,
Well,
like during the Great
there
Finance.
was Simon. There was a time where there was a belief, and this is very much a pandemic. M2 money supply exploding, all of that. But there was a time people thought R star was negative.
Yeah, right. And that's what I was going to say. Is like
That's frightening.
even during the Great Financial Crisis, I was reading, like, I don't know, something. I don't know, Ben Bernanke was saying, but there was like these estimates of where neutral rate was at the time, and that in order to stimulate the economy, through the traditional methods of what you would experience through the lowering of Fed funds rate, they would have had to take Fed funds rate down to -6.5%
Yep.
in order to
Yep.
get far enough below the neutral interest rate at the time in order to stimulate the economy. And that was just like not going to happen, right?
No,
And so they didn't, like, they were like, no, that's off the
off
table.
the
That's not a
table.
possibility.
Not doing that. Not going
So
negative.
And that's where the forward guidance and the massive quantitative easings and all this other stuff came into play, so that
Right.
they would have a way of trying to stimulate the economy that wasn't necessarily through the dropping of the Fed funds rate. And
Right.
really, that's more of the main policy tool now from the Federal Reserve. And although it's not easily like understood how that monetary policy works, because most people are just so focused in on Fed funds rate adjustments as being the main policy tool, but it's the communication about that and giving the forward guidance about that that then pushes the markets around. And you can see that happening here. I mean, really look at the mortgage rates dropping prior to the Fed even doing anything. Like, I mean, they sat on their hands the whole time and went from 8% to 6% before they even had any
Yep.
kind of adjustment of rates. So,
Right.
like, they can push out information that moves the markets as so long as it's credible and, I guess they go forward with at least some
Hmm.
effort.
Yeah. You know, one thing I've never asked you that I'd love to
Uh,
hear about is all the stuff that you know now. If you could rewind the clock, knowing what you know now, but you're 20 years younger, what would 20-year younger Simon be doing in this environment to get on the path to building wealth and all of that? What would younger Simon do knowing what you know today? Any thoughts on that? I know that's an odd question, but hey, I threw it out there anyway.
okay. Simon at 28 years old. Uh, if I was in my 20s, especially if I was in my mid or early 20s, but even in the late 20s or even into your early 30s or more, um, I would the one thing that I would definitely do is find some sort of compounding interest investment to get into, like to build some sort of compounding interest. And it doesn't need to be even be a lot, like, 50, $100 a month, every single month for the rest of your life. And just commit to that part of things. And then after that, you can start moving to other things. But commit yourself to that one kind of thing early, early, early. Like the earlier the better. In fact, like, in your teenage years, because every single year at the end of this thing is going to be worth hundreds of thousands, if not more. So it's so important to start compounding interest very, very early. But after that, I would absolutely, absolutely do whatever I could to try and acquire some sort of property. And whether that's a house to live in or rental property or even just bare land somewhere, is to become some sort of property owner. And even if you have to team up with other people or figure out how to, is because it's not easy to do that. But that is one of the things that I have learned, especially over the last 2 or 3 years, is that looking back through history and all these, economies and different theories and everything else, it really relates down to there's two people who will live independently of the state, just two of them. The capitalist who invests into the system, the guy who buys all those stocks and bonds and businesses or whatever it is that's going on out there, and the property owners. And that's it. Those two people are the ones who live independently of the state. Everybody else is subject to a boss, to a government rule, I mean, they're all going to be government rule, but
Mhm.
you're going to have to, put out effort in order to maintain your life by, following a boss's rule or government rule or something else. But if you're a capitalist or you're a property owner, that's the only position in which that is going to be truly independently of the state.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, it's like the longer you wait for that, the harder it's going to be, because the more time goes on, the more this stuff gets more expensive, the more separation between the rich and the poor, the more concentration of wealth that is happening. And it's not something to get mad at. You can, yeah, I mean, you can get frustrated and mad at it, but it's just better to understand the situation for what it is and then know that it's not something that's going to reverse. It's not something that is going to be, you know, good times for everybody. There's not going to be this like, oh, right, we're all sitting around singing kumbaya and stuff. Like, that's not going to happen, right? So it's like survival of the fittest. It's figuring out what it is that you need to do in order to position yourself to be on that other side of the wedge. And that's really what it comes down to, is being a capitalist and being a property owner, however you can get that done.
Yeah, I kind of have the same thoughts, right? Again, for me, getting wealthy is a remarkably simple three-step formula. Step one is create disposable income, right? That is the money that you could put into the seeds that become this compounding thing. Step two is you got to become elite at something. I don't care what that is. For me, it was a buy box in Fresno, California, right? A very small buy box where I spent 3 years fishing and found 6 homes. And then you got to do it for a decade. The thing that people miss in today's instant gratification world is it takes time to be wealthy.
Oh, yeah.
And The capitalist, run a small business, stack paper, buy assets. At the end of the day, something that I've known for 30 years, having, studied economy and have an MBA, asset owners win. Asset owners win. And when it means getting wealthy. Inflation's a feature, not a bug, right?
Mm-hmm.
I wish more people understood that. And 9% inflation's a problem, no doubt, but inflation is built into the system. And we happen to be remarkably lucky in the United States. Lots of places, Canada, Australia, New Zealand, they don't have this. We have 30-year money. You can get 30-year money on residential properties, 1 through 4 units. That's like free money sometimes. There are people on this call, there are people that were watching this that have 30-year money below 3%. You win. That's amazing. So, again, get focused on creating disposable or discretionary income.
Yeah.
That's where this game starts.
And really, like, everything has to be built. Like, everything has to be built. You can't, like, you're not like, I guess you could go out there and just, like, instantaneously, some people could, but I don't know how to do that, right? I mean, everything that I know how to do has to be pieced together little bits at a time, because that's how I do it. Like,
Me too.
I mean, building a YouTube channel is one video at a time, right? You just, like, you got to each building a house, it's one stud at a time. You got to put it all
Yep.
into place. And so, understanding that it's like these things need to be built, and every day, it's just a little tiny piece of it that you have to keep putting together. So you're right. Over 10 years, like, I'm thinking 10 years is still, like, that's a short window on what something that is going to be, like, really built, that is going to be lasting, or generational wealth or something. This is like a lifetime worth of building things up.
Mm-hmm.
Starting early, yeah, it gives you a nice position. By the time you're 40, you're like, man, look what I've built up. But ultimately, it's starting with that single piece of it. Like, everybody talks about it, that first rental income, that was such a, hammered old house that took forever, that they had to, again, go down and buy that gallon of paint, go down and buy the piece of trim. It was all pieced together. And now they have that rental income that is now generating money for them, or they were able to sell it off, or whatever it is that's happening. But again, it was done generally a piece at a time. However, you can
Couldn't agree
expedite
more.
that. If you got money to invest and throw at it, make it go faster, well, yeah, sure. Then you're still piecing it together by, doing this in multiple ways with multiple incomes, but it's always pieced together.
Yeah, everybody can do it. The wealth formula is remarkably simple. I never said it was easy, but it's a very simple formula. It takes time. Everyone can get there. I talk to people on this channel that have their ninth grade dropouts, teenage moms, people with $90,000 in debt, raising 3 kids. It's all possible. It just takes time. Um, you know, I, I, I have a particular goal, Simon. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. Again, just springing on this from the left field is one of the things I've gotten comfortable saying is my goal for my channel and everything I do for the next, hopefully many, many decades is I'm trying to grow the middle class. I think we've had several decades where middle class is being hollowed out. I think we have been indoctrinated to go to school to get a job to become part of the machine. I think we've been indoctrinated to the 40-40-40 life, work 40 hours for 40 years to live on 40% as it's okay. I'm trying to get people excited about, a decade of sacrifice, a decade of choices. Because if you do that, you can do nearly anything after that. So what do you think the chances are we can grow the middle class? Or are we just screwed and we're only going to have lower and upper soon?
God, I hate to be the negative dude. I don't see the middle class being grown. I'm sorry, bro.
Okay. I don't mind.
I mean, with that being said, it doesn't mean that you don't have opportunity. Like, that's, I think that's just generally speaking for the economy and what we have experienced here over the last 100 years, is that we have a shift in the way that the economy functions, as far as being a production saving nation to a debtor spending nation. It's not the same. It's not the same environment anymore. However, your ability to move onto the other side of the wedge is not impossible. In fact, it's actually pretty easy, when you start working towards it and building up the pieces of it. So even though I don't really see a middle class coming back where you can have that average job that goes out and buys a house and raises the family and has the car, and you can just sit there and just, drop money into your retirement portfolio and drink beer for the rest of the day. I don't see that happening. Like I don't think that's going to be something that can come back. But the ability for you to say, start up anything, like there's so many ways to make money. I don't even know. Like I mean, it's just like it's like online sales or starting businesses or just doing whatever. There's so much. Like money flies everywhere. You just got to learn how to reach out and grab it.
Mm-hmm.
And so when I say that, I just don't feel that the ability for the nation to move back into a production saving nation, which is what grows a good, strong economy and has that good, strong middle class to it. I just don't see that coming back here to the United States. We would have to be a manufacturing state again. And in order to be a manufacturing state, we would have to have a standard of living that is competitive against the rest of the world out there who has a much lesser standard of living, who is making the same products. There's just no way you're going to compete against that. So I just don't see how it is that we can move back to a middle class that is going to be strong. But with that being said, understanding that you can totally put yourself in a middle class position if you work hard at it. You're just not going to be able to do it with your typical 9 to 5 job. Like that's not going to do it. A good job sucks. It's not going to work. You have to move on beyond that.
Yeah. I think there's, again, it's a mission that I'm not going to give up on, but I think the most important thing that you highlighted there is it's a choice. One of the things that in the United States, unlike some other countries, your life is not destined at birth, right? You're not born into a caste. You're not born into some life of servitude because of who your parents are. I fundamentally believe in the United States and maybe some other countries that you can make choices as an adult that changes your circumstance. I interview and speak with many people every week who grew up in environments that no one would wish for their kids. And through sacrifice, consistency, effort, and sure, maybe a little luck, they all have lives that most people would want now. I believe that's an ambitious and worthy goal. Whether or not we articulate it to some middle class era from the 1960s or 70s, okay. I want everybody to realize that they can do it. Your life is not set in stone when you were born. I refuse to accept that.
Yeah, I can tell you now, and I don't mean any offense to this, but it's a mental health issue. It really is. It's a survivalist mindset that keeps you locked into a lower class, poverty stricken life. The world is full of abundance. It is massively abundant out there, but most people don't realize it. They think that it's limited. They think the government holds them down. They think the environment holds them down. Everything, the society's holding them down. Everything holds them down. And because they have express this belief out there and they have all this blame on the external, they're trying to fix all this external stuff so that they can win. And the problem with it is that you will never ever 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 be able to fix the external. The only thing you can do is fix the internal. And once you have learned that it's the survival mindset that you're living in, and you need to switch that over to an abundance mindset that everything is always there in abundance. You just got to figure out how it is that that abundance flows towards you, and not creating the walls of negativity against the world out there that says we need a new political environment, we need a new social environment, we need all this other stuff out there. You don't need to change any of that stuff. You just need to change the way that it is that you're thinking and feeling and believing on the inside. And I guarantee you, once you do, the ability to have money flowing towards you becomes so much easier. It's just like it's not even something
Exactly.
that's complicated after that, because you just don't have a mindset that you're limited. It's just like, it's just nothing but abundance, and you're just like,
Yeah.
okay, well, let's go get that and let's go get that and let's figure that out. And how long do we have to work on that? Well, let's start putting the pieces together to make that happen. Let's
I
build
love
that
that.
thing up and make it happen. So
I, yeah.
that's really what it is. It's a mental health deterioration, depression, lost hope kind of idea that keeps people from actually being successful.
Ricky actually had a comment here that I might actually tweak what I'm doing here. Ricky actually highlights that we have two classes, quote unquote, the working class and the investing class. So maybe instead of calling it the middle class, I'm trying to fix, maybe I should talk about growing the investing class. That
Yeah.
might feel a little better.
Well, I agree. The investing class, like I think about it like the capitalist. Like the capitalism seems to have this bad stigma attached to it, like, ooh, capital is bad. And I'm like,
Bad.
why? I don't understand that. Like, I don't understand why capitalists are bad. Like, I was wearing a Rebel Capitalist shirt, and I'm at a hotel up in Seattle, and I'm in this elevator, right? And so I'm standing proud with my Rebel Capitalist shirt right there, and this guy reads it, and I kid you not, he gives me this face of like disappointment, like, like that, and I'm like, bro,
Dude,
and like,
what's
what's the
up?
problem, man? Let's go make this money. Let's go out there and make this happen. But
Yeah.
yet, this capitalism seems to have this negative, like, this negative tone to being that kind of person or something like that. And I'm thinking, no, that's what we need to survive from. This is what it is that we need to do as a whole to try and bring back what it is that we would assume to be like that American life, right? Is to be able to have a cash or enough cash on hand to have the wife, the kids, the car, all this stuff, right? And unfortunately, since most people put themselves in a position that says, hey, this is a bad thing to do, they'll never acquire it. It is just literally in their head.
Ricky, you've helped me out, buddy. We are going to start growing the investor class. I like that. I like that, Ricky. I don't know, Simon. Do you ever look at your YouTube statistics, YouTube stats, or whatever they call them?
I mean, occasionally I check at the current analytics to see like
Yeah.
where my current videos are doing and stuff like that. But no, like I don't like occasionally
So,
I'll go back and see like the how many I have of total or something like that.
yeah.
But I haven't recently.
So something you could do for me later because I know you're doing this from your phone. I've gone to YouTube Analytics, audience, and then I pulled up the 15 channels that my audience watches.
Yeah.
Number one, the uneducated economist.
Right
But more, yeah,
on. Thanks,
yeah,
guys.
it is. It's number one. So I'm going to read you all the 15 because this changed for me, and I want to know if it's changing for you. But here are the 15: Uneducated Economist, Dion Talk, Jason Walter, The David Green Show, Row Built, On the Market, Ryan Pineda, The Rate Update, Bigger Pockets, Danielle DiMartino Booth, Jason Hartman, Real Estate Rookie, Jeb Smith, Coach Carson, Pace Morby. The
Okay.
reason I read you that list, those are the top 15 sites or channels my folks watch. Not one of them is a crash bro. 6 months ago, 12 months ago, more than half my audience was consuming crash bro material.
Mm-hmm.
It's now running on 2 weeks. There's been no crash bros in my top 15. And the reason I bring this up is the mental health issue, is the what you take in is what you feel. The
Yep.
crash bros and doomers have hurt so many people. In fact, the only people that are benefiting from the doom and porn created are the creators themselves. So talk about blocking out negativity, not seeking just yuck and disgust and just nastiness. You have to block that stuff, right?
Um, well, you have to block it out of your thoughts. And here's the thing, like once you kind of like at least for me, I don't really like look at the external as validation or anything of that nature. Like, I mean, I like seeing my channel grow. I like to see the good comments and I like to see stuff like that. But I've had plenty of people who will come on and say, you screwed up, your house is underwater, you're a dipshit, like all this stuff, right? And I'm like, okay, I don't need you in my room, right?
Yeah.
And so like it's
Hunt.
just yeah, I'm sorry, bro. Like if you had like something like, I mean, if you have criticism, that's fine. But it's like to the point of like just assuming a lot of stuff and just calling me, dumb and all kinds of things. Like I don't get anything out of this. Like there's no value that I gain from it. So I don't absorb a lot of that stuff, it says, hey, man, there's this negative thing that's happening. I have my own beliefs. I thought the housing market was going to drop. I really did. Like, I would have been on board with those crash bros saying once the interest rates go up, housing prices is going to come down. That was a very common statement out there. Like, everybody was kind of saying that. Now, I look back on that and I'm like, okay, I have to reevaluate what it is that I was saying at the time because that didn't happen. It was one of the reasons that almost kept me from buying a house that is now I'm 3 years into buying this house. I have massive amounts of equity into it. My payments are so much like almost what people are paying for a rent on a 2-bedroom apartment or something like that. And I'm thinking, oh my God, I was so close to not
Thank
buying this
goodness.
house because of the fear factor that was involved with it alone. And it literally tore me up. I mean, I talked about this the other night in a 3 hour live stream, and 2 o'clock in the morning. Anyway, but I was telling this exact story about it. And I was so scared about buying this house. I thought for sure, I thought I was I had mentally prepared myself to go underwater. I was like, all the stuff. And everything opposite of that happened. So, I mean, here I am looking at this property thinking, man, I can't even buy the house that I'm living in now. Like, I cannot even
Yeah.
buy this particular place.
Right.
Astoria, this is the thing. Astoria, okay, I was looking at some of this stuff, and I think it was between 10,000 and 50,000 in a city, right? If they were
Mhm.
at the population 10,000 to 50, Astoria is in the top 10 most expensive places to live.
Wow.
Right. And I had no idea that I knew it was expensive here and I saw it happening because like, I've been here my whole life. So it transitioned from this working class community of logger fishermen, dive bars to this very trendy hospital district growing retirement, all the fancy stuff. And it doesn't look the same anymore.
Mhm.
I didn't realize how expensive this place had really become. And I mean, it was just like looking at what it is that I have going on here. I cannot think the the powers that be, the universe or whatever, that really forced me into the purchase of this house because I literally felt forced. I didn't want to buy it. I wanted to buy it when the prices came down, when all the stuff. It wouldn't have worked. That would have been the totally wrong strategy. But the universe had no other had given me no other choice. It was just like,
Mhm.
sorry, bro, you're buying a house. Here you go. Yeah, or you got to leave. One of the two.
Yeah.
And so since I didn't want to leave, here I am. And yeah, I just waiting around for an inevitable crash that may never come is going to leave you with lost opportunity.
Yeah.
I mean,
I
like I
that's
said, if I had listened to them Crash Bros, if I had listened to myself right, at the time, I would not be in this house. And so again, like I just wanted to wait to see the prices come down and it didn't happen. And so like I stepped back and I was like, okay, let's reevaluate this and figure out why it
yeah.
is that it's really taking place now. And those are learning lessons.
Yeah. Um, I'm actually going to bring up I have a file called the 54-year spreadsheet. Have you ever seen? I think I showed you once this probably a year or two ago. 54-year spreadsheets talking about home sales prices, all of that. And the reason I want to bring this up is I was just on Jason Walters' podcast, and a lot of Crash Bro followers just ate me alive in the comments, calling me an idiot, a moron, blah blah blah.
Mm.
Their basic feeling was if demand falls, prices have to fall. That statement must have been said, I don't know, a dozen times in very colorful language. And unfortunately, they don't understand what's called price elasticity. They don't understand the value of shelter. They don't understand switching cost. And they don't understand that we've been here before. Simon, would it surprise you to know that existing home sales fell 50% in a 4 or 5 year period and prices went up before this 2020 craziness? Would that surprise you?
That home sales would fall 50% and the prices go up.
Correct.
Now it wouldn't. But prior to the last few years, yes, that would be very surprising.
Yeah.
That would be a surprising statement, I would think. That if the house
Yeah.
price, if the home sales fell, you would just assume the prices would fall as well to try and attract buyers to make the home sales go up, right? I mean, it's just like kind of seems that way.
Yep. Yep. And a lot of Crash Bros are telling that story, a lot of their followers. But again, we have history and experience, and people can look this up. I know it's going to be really small on your phone, but can you see the view? I know you
Yes,
probably
I
can't
know.
read it, but so here we go. 1978. Existing home sales whoops, I scrolled to the right. Sorry. Let me go back to 1978. 1978, home sales were 3.986 million. And I want to show you that they never went over 3.9 until 1996. 18 years, we are below that number.
Oh,
And this is what people don't realize is demand for housing could be low for a long time. So we didn't go above 3.9 until 1996. But here is your nominal home appreciation year by year. We only had one negative year. That was 1991. So look at that. So again, this notion, this story that that demand will fall and prices will fall also is just flat out wrong. Look at this: 12%, 3%, 6%, 8%, 13%, 7. So again, this is something I brought up years ago. This is something you and I talked about years ago. The only thing that was going to happen when rates went up is transactions were going to fall. I called a transaction crash, not price crash. And I don't know why I get hate for that. I don't know why I get hate for being right.
Well, it's because they want you to be so wrong so that they can, again, they're blaming the external, right? I mean, here you are, you're showing the evidence, so that people can internalize this information to make the best decisions for themselves. And they're like, no, you're wrong. I need you to change the external for me so that I can have a better life. Um, I mean, that's really what it comes down to. And that's why they're so upset about it. I just think about like, I step back and look at this and I was like, okay, the idea that interest rates go up and house prices will come down makes a lot of sense until all cash buyers come in on a third of these purchases. They can care less where interest rates are at, right? If you're an all cash buyer, you're willing to buy at this price, and it
Yeah,
doesn't matter what the
the
interest rates are.
biggest thing that people missed? The biggest thing that the amateur economists missed is the move up buyer. When you study housing for decades, like I have, you realize that the lion's share of transactions is the move up buyer. They sell one and they buy one. So if you jack up interest rates 500 basis points in a 6-minute window, you have killed the move up buyer. So those two transactions gone. Transactions collapse. But that doesn't mean prices, because you still have the cash buyers, you still have the rich folks, you still have first-time home buyers with FHA and VA financing. It just means transactions stop. So I think a lot of people missed the move-up buyer exiting the market, right? There are people like yourself who are going to stay put because you couldn't afford to buy the home you're in today. The move-up
Yeah.
buyer's dead. You're frozen, but you're happy as a clam. Rent, mortgage below rent, you're just going to stay put. So this thing that's called the turnover that used to be 8.1 years is probably going to balloon to 12 or 13 years because people are not going to move, which means transactions will be down for years. Last time, 16 years we were down. People think this is going to be a snapback V-shaped recovery. Not happening. We are going to be down, down, down for transactions for years to come, in my opinion.
Yeah. And, I mean, I can definitely see that being the case. And that's going to be it's going to be difficult to try and bring new inventory in. Right. If you have, this is the thing, like a home builder wants to build. They don't not want to build. Right. I mean,
Yeah.
it was just
They
like they
want to
want
build
to build.
profitably. They want to build
Yeah.
profitably.
But
Yes.
exactly. And so if their profit margin requires them to build this expensive house so that they can actually make a dollar off of it, then it doesn't really leave a whole lot of opportunity to bring in starter homes.
I agree.
And so again, like it's an unfortunate circumstance that which we are in, which again I see that separation happening because of it. Like if you're a property owner, man, you're going to be loving it if you're in that position ahead of time, but it's going to be a wider wedge that is driven because of it. If you don't have a position in which that transactions are taking place, like you're saying, they're going to fall and they're going to be dramatically low. And I'm a builder who's just like, this is my job. I mean, I got to eat, pay my bills just like
Yep.
everybody else. And you're telling me that I'm going to build a house, but the chances of it selling aren't going to be as prevalent into the market as they once were. My whole business model that I had experienced before is now vanished. It's gone. Like
Yeah.
I have to now
Not to mention
reestablish
that, but
myself.
you also have commercial banking not lending to the small and medium sized builder. You've only got the giants who have, stock they can sell or bonds they can issue. The small and medium guy is out because the commercial banking sector is effed, given their terrible balance sheets.
And what I find interesting is that, I think a lot of times people misunderstand that like even when like, well, the government will come in and just subsidize and help out with this. Well, you can't just magically make people do the skill. You know, it's
Yeah.
just like, I mean, like this has to be built just like everything
Yeah.
else. It's a guy who hires people. He has his equipment. He gets the next guys who can roof and do all the, you know, I mean, it's just like, you know, you flip it, throw some money at it. Okay, now where are all the people? They'll show up eventually, but you know, it's just like, you know, you
Yeah.
can't just magically just like all of a sudden here's people swinging hammers out of nowhere, you know, and like even though we do have like this massive immigration thing happening, again, it's like the building up of those businesses that will do that work. And
Yeah.
so it's not like something you can just instantly turn on. It can happen quickly, but it's
Yeah.
not something like, you know, here tomorrow we're going to start doing it. No, it's like
No, not nothing like that.
you know, you got to ramp this thing up over time. And considering like the labor costs and stuff going into the house, I could only imagine that if you have a ramping up of demand for labor, then the price of that labor is going to go up, making the cost of the house go up. You know, it's just like I don't. It's a very difficult thing to throw money at a problem like that when the money is throwing at demand,
Yep.
right? Like here, you know, we're going to figure out all this way to increase the demand. Like here, provide cheaper loans, provide more people, first time home buyers, all this other stuff. You increase this demand, now they're going into a limited amount of supply. Well, if you try to increase just the supply, now you're going to have issues that come from that as well. In which, like what we were just saying, like you know, now you got like anytime government involves themselves into anything, it's going to be inefficient. They're going to throw more
It's
tax
horrible.
money at something that is going to be absolutely horrible. The free market can do that quite well. They can handle that. But if you limit the free market with all kinds of red tape that prevents them from even starting a home, again,
Yeah.
it's just like literally government getting out of the way is the only thing that I could see really helping that situation out. But them throwing money at it is going to be inefficient and cost taxpayers. It's going to create even more separation between the rich and the poor. I wouldn't I wouldn't expect that to be a good thing. It'll be
No.
the beginning of it'll be awesome for the people who have access to it. Right? They're
Yeah.
they're gonna love it. They're gonna love the all that stuff. But as time goes on, it's gonna be making it worse. It's
Absolutely. Well, Simon, you were an amazing featured speaker at the Las Vegas event last year. Are we going to get lucky enough to get Simon 2.0 February 15th, 16th in Vegas? You coming back or what's going on?
absolutely, man. Thank you. Yes, I will be there, man.
That is so awesome. Simon, you're amazing, man. Thank you for being here. Where can
Yeah.
people find you?
So I'm pretty much active on YouTube. I have all the other social media accounts, but really I'm active on YouTube. That's where I'm going to be at. If you want to send me an email, uneducatedeconomist@gmail, it gets really filled up at times. So just bear with me if I haven't answered an email or if you emailed me in the past and I haven't replied, maybe send me another one. But that's pretty much where you can where you can access, contact me. But yeah, you know, pretty much active on YouTube and you know.
Cool. Simon, you're amazing, man. Thank you for being a part of school. Thank you for helping out everyone. Take care. Have a wonderful, wonderful Sunday.
Yeah, man. Thank you very much.
Later, everyone. Don't forget, 10 o'clock, Dan Bird, if you want to come back.